Workplace well-being. Is that a human-centered approach to leading or a key to higher level performance? Is it a nice to have or a critical for survival thing? 4 questions in paradox. 1 answer. Yes. Today, we are going to be practical about the mindsets and share some specific advice to help you create that workplace well-being and get great results to engage, retain, and inspire your team. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders like you grow personally and professionally so that you can lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for your team, organization, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, in the future, you could be with us live on your favorite social channel. This one, it's too late, but we do these regularly on places like LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and more. And you can find out when, where, and how you can join us for those by going to our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. That'll give you all the scoop. I hope you'll join us for that. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective and a new set of tools to create the great results their organizations and team members want and need. That's what Flexible Leadership can provide you. Learn more and order your copy now at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest, and then I'm going to introduce her. There she is. I will introduce her, and then we will get started. Her name is Paula Davis. She is the founder and CEO of the Stress and Resilience Institute. For 15 years, she's been a trusted advisor to leaders in organizations of all sizes, helping them make work better. She's a globally recognized expert on the effects of workplace stress, burnout prevention, workplace well-being, and building resilience for individuals and teams. She left her law practice after 7 years and earned a master's degree in applied psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Paula, there's a bunch of you from that program that have been here or will be here soon. She's the author of Beating Burnout at Work: Why Teams Hold the Secret to Wellbeing and Resilience, which was nominated for the best new book by the Next Big Idea Club and was featured here on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Her newest book is Lead Well: 5 Mindsets to Engage, Retain, and Inspire Your Team, which will be our focus today. She has shared her expertise at educational institutions such as Harvard Law School, Wharton School of Executive Education, and Princeton. She's a 2-time recipient of the Distinguished Teaching Award from the Medical College of Wisconsin. She has been featured in or on the New York Times, the Oprah Magazine, Washington Post. She's been everywhere. She's a contributor to Forbes, Fast Company, and Psychology Today. And as I hinted earlier, she's back on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. She was here in June of 2021. So over 200 episodes ago. And Paula, welcome back. So glad you're here.
Thank you, Kevin. I've had this date circled. I've been really looking to talk to you. We're looking forward to talking to you again in your audience.
It's exciting, and I'm glad to have you. And you've written a great book. And everybody, there's lots of good reasons to read a good book. One of them is it's short. I'm aspiring. I haven't gotten here yet, Paula. So here's my new one. Like I haven't gotten I'm getting better, but I'm not as good as you. I'm getting better. They're getting shorter. So anyway, listen, I'm so glad you're here. In the bio intro, talked a little bit about your journey. Talked a little bit about all of the focus on resilience, and that's certainly in this book, but it's not the whole piece of this book. So tell me a little bit about your journey and why this book?
So I started my career as a lawyer. So I practiced law for 7 years and then burned out during what became the last year of my law practice. And so that was my sort of stop the moment, figure out, Paula, what do you want to do with your career? Do you want to continue on practicing or do something else? And I decided to, because I hired a coach, so very serendipitously, she had just finished the Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program at UPenn. And I said, what is positive psychology? Like, that's a thing? Like, because my undergrad is in psychology. And I loved it. And so, long story short, applied, got in, and was going through the program. And that's where I first not only started to learn about the science of workplace well-being, but really the science of resilience. And that the professors that were teaching me were really the world's leading experts in the science of resilience in a number of different ways. And when I dug into the research and was learning from them, I just was like, I wish I had this. Like, this is a teachable thing. Like, I wish, how can I teach this to other people? And so, that was really my entry point into, the science generally, but also my love of wanting to learn more and understand about what that science was about. And so, all these, for the past 15 years, my work has really intersected at, well-being, resilience, and burnout prevention, looking at that through a systems lens now, very much like not just helping individuals, but how can we better teams? How can we better leaders? Which is how we stumble upon the new book about the 5 mindsets.
And we'll get to those 5 mindsets in a few minutes. We talked about the book, why the book, and why the book from your journey, but why is this book, and we're going to talk about it obviously, but why is it important that the world needs what you're talking about right now? Like, what's set the why stage for us?
Yeah, so I usually open with this slide when I give my keynotes and my presentations, just talking about the fact that we're in such a seismic shift with our world of work right now. I mean, you've got the convergence of the pandemic aftermath, which I think a lot of leaders still underappreciate. And I know a lot of us want to just not talk about the pandemic anymore.
Vastly underappreciate
the psychology and how that experience that we all went through has really shaped and shifted how people think about their life generally and about work specifically. But we've got, the where do we work conversation still going on, the remote work versus hybrid work versus return to office mandates. We have the fact that there's just been a lot of growth and change generally. We are living in a climate of perpetual uncertainty, geopolitical, name the type of uncertainty. And we're really, kind of finding ourselves in that. And add to all of that the conversation about generative AI and how that is going to continue to vastly shape our landscape at work in the next 5 to 10 years plus. And you have a whole recipe for stress and uncertainty and change. And leaders really, I think, are undereducated about how to lead from the perspective of helping usher their teams through this profound moment of stress and change and challenge and uncertainty.
So I want to, the book, the subtitle of the book is 5 Mindsets, and we will get to the 5 mindsets, but I'm a big proponent of the idea of mindsets before we get into the skills. And so I'm specifically curious, Paula, why did you frame the book around mindsets? We'll get to what they are later, but I'm just curious, as the author, you have the chance to say, how do I want to frame this? Yeah. Why did you choose to frame it? I think wisely, but why did you choose to frame it around mindsets?
Yeah, so I struggled with the title and the subtitle. I struggled with the title for a really, really long time. We didn't pick the title until really the 11th hour. I settled on the mindsets wording and idea and framework in my mind, though, quite early in the process. And once I landed on that, it was like I wasn't moving from it. And it was because I really want leaders to be thinking differently and recognizing that they need to be thinking differently about the way that they need to lead if they want the results of thriving and resilience and motivation and engagement and all of these good things, because this is a different time that really calls for a new way of thinking. And so that mindset piece was a really critical word for me to include and have in that.
Well, I love that because, we're not going to get different results without different actions, and we can't get different actions without different thinking. And so I'm a big proponent and believer. There's a lot about that in all of our work. And I love that that's where you're headed. And we'll get to those 5 things in a few minutes, but there's a couple things I want to do first before we get there. You talk about some research that was done, and I hinted at this in the open. actually in the open for the, at the very beginning, about the fact that there are some things that people might hold as paradoxes that really go together. And so you talk about some research that says that organizations that have both a people and performance focus, when most people would think about, well, we're either performance focused or people focused. But you're saying, and the research is saying, that when organizations that have both are most successful. So number one, what does it mean to have a people plus performance focus? And number two, why is that leading them to be more successful?
Yeah, I find this conversation, I think it's fascinating. And it's also a little bit bizarre for me because I start the book with the story about my dad and my mom and dad who started a business, and that my dad just really figured out intuitively how to lead in a way that held both the performance piece, the profits piece, the money piece, and the people piece in tandem with each other. And so that's really how I've grown up in my world of work. And so it's so intuitive to me to think this way because that's the model that I had, that I have to remind myself that this isn't often the way that we think in our world of work. It's, especially these days with work being so complex and global and fast paced, the profits and the money piece really often takes hold. And so that's part of why I wanted to build the case, kind of going back to my law days. I wanted to build the argument or build the case in this book for why do we need to be thinking in this way? Why do we need to be elevating the people side to equal the performance and the money and the profits and all of that? And so I try to lay out as much of that business case as I can and that argument as I can in one of the chapters of the book. And I stumbled across a study that I think really helped to sort this out and actually looked at quite a number of different organizations around the world and sorted them into 4 categories. Those who were your typical performers, who were really neither excelling really at the profit side or excelling at the people side. And I think that was more than half of the companies that the research actually looked at. So most organizations are kind of in that typical
55%. Yes.
55%.
It's on page 24, everybody. When you get your copy.
Yes. It's summarized right there. And then they looked at a percentage of companies who were really excelling on that profit or money side, a percentage of companies who were excelling on the people side, the human capital side. And then the smallest portion of companies that they surveyed were actually elevated in both categories. They were excelling on both the people and the performance side. And so then they looked at, well, what were they really seeing? What were the companies, and what was it, 9%, I think, of the blended companies who had that elevated people and performance, sort of metric down, noticed a whole host of great outcomes in terms of better attrition rates, higher revenue, getting through, the tail end of the pandemic and some of those shifts and swings much easier than the companies in the other categories. And it's been interesting when I unpack this research with a lot of organizations. I do get a fair amount of pushback, and I write about that in the book. And I talk about how there's, I think, really a missing piece of the folks who are, kind of focusing just on the money and the profits or excelling in that category only are sort of telling an incomplete story. So while they are doing great on the financial side, which of course is really important, right? For businesses, we all have to care about the money piece of it. What the research really revealed is that when times are good, that's great. When times are not so great, when you're in the periods of uncertainty and the change and the challenge, companies that just have that profit sort of centric focus only tend to struggle more, right? It's sort of like the people may not quite be on board in the same way as those who are taking the blended approach. And so they struggle, and it takes them longer to get where they want to go compared to some of those other organizations. And so I think it's really important to tell the full story, that while the money part might seem good, it's good in certain circumstances. And so there's more to say about that.
I love that. I love that that's how you build the case for this, because here's the thing I will say. As we unpack these 5, or as much as we have time for, these 5 mindsets, there's nothing here that anyone will argue with. Except the big but is, but we got a business to run here. Like, these all sound, as I said in the open, like nice to have. But what you're suggesting is, no, these aren't just nice to have. Like, if you want to maybe just survive, but certainly if you want to thrive, you have to start to think about your business in new ways, including these 5 ways. And we'll get to those in just a second. But before we go there, and I know that all of this work is interconnected with your work around stress and resilience
Mhm.
in general, but
Mhm.
I think it's useful for us to take a second, because I have your expertise here.
Mhm.
And before everyone goes back and listens to episode 285, and we'll have that in the show notes for you. You can listen to Paula talk about preventing burnout. But what are the sources, root causes of stress and disengagement? So if we've now said, here's the business case, but let's talk about what are the root causes of this problem that we really need to work to overcome. And then we'll talk about the mindsets we need to start to make the change. So
Yeah.
what are those root causes?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about this piece because this is what I think keeps getting missed in our world of one-off programs and more benefits and more tactics and more individual facing types of things, which are all good and needed and important. We're missing the deeper conversation around what's actually driving the problem, right? It's not until we actually start to tackle the root cause or the problems that are leading to these, consequences of demotivation and low engagement and stress and burnout that we're really going to start to make headway. And that's where you start to get into more of this interconnectivity, right? So it's not just an individual failing of stress management. There really are cultural and leader shaped sorts of things that are happening that are really leading to these consequences. And so the first one, which is, I would say, by far and away the biggest one that I continue to hear and certainly heard in the last handful of years, out and about doing, kind of collecting all of this information, was unmanageable workload. I just have too much work to do and I'm trying to get my arms around it and I feel like I'm treading water and at any moment I might sink. So that unmanageable workload piece is not for everybody, but I think in a lot of circumstances really driving the bus here in terms of root causes. The next one that actually I heard quite a lot that was a little bit more surprising was lack of recognition. So lack of recognition showing up as I don't hear thank you a lot. I'm unsure of the significance or the impact that I'm making. I feel like I'm working at a specific level, but my title doesn't match. I feel like I have earned the right to be on that deal pitch or part of that more visible project, and people aren't asking me or inviting me. So that's a big one. Another one is unfairness. And so that's also a big category of things like lack of transparency. I know there are changes going on. There are whispers, there are closed door meetings, things are happening and no one's saying anything to me about it. And I'm uncertain about where I stand or where my team stands or what the future of the company even looks like. That unfairness piece is also just general corporate politics, organizational politics, and red tape, right? I need to get a quick answer to something and it takes me 7 forms in 2 weeks before, someone actually says something. Another big one is lack of community. And this one has been called into sharper focus for sure in the past handful of years about what does community even mean anymore? Because it's not just walking down the hallway and having random water cooler conversations with people anymore, right? So we have to expand how we look at that. Lack of autonomy is another one. So I don't have that requisite control and flexibility over the decisions that I can make, where and when I work, et cetera. And then values misalignment and lack of meaning. And I'm hearing this one a lot more, certainly in the last couple of years or so. And I think that's sort of part of the pandemic aftermath showing up, also intergenerational conversations too, around what are the values I want from my world of work? What does my organization say it values? And do leaders really live those values? Or are those values just a nice little poster that I see on the wall when I walk into work or that we hear all the time in our town halls? So it's those 6 pieces, and they're all interconnected, that we really have to start prioritizing and looking at. And so that framework really also helped to shape where I went with the mindsets.
So yes, and people, as we unpack the mindsets in a second, you'll see connections there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious. I'm going to take a little bit of a contrarian view here,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of those you mentioned, and we could certainly talk around the community one about, okay, that's different now than it was, pre-pandemic 5 years ago. But some of the rest of those, some people with maybe a few more years under their belt,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like as old as Kevin, might be saying, okay, but Paula, those things have always been there. Like, why are they more important, or are they more important now? Or are you just sort of saying, hey, we got to pay attention to these facts?
Yeah,
Now?
I think I think it's more so that we have to start paying attention to them, because when you start to peel back the layers of why we keep seeing consistently high burnout rates, why the disengagement levels are at their 10-year low according to Gallup research, why we're seeing, you know, these extraordinary levels of stress and discontent and other things in our world of work, there has to be a reason why. And so I think because of the different forces that have shaped and are continuing to shape our world of work in the past handful of years, for sure, I think these 6 are just called into sharper focus, such that until we really start to dig into them, you know, it's going to be hard to move the ball forward. And even if these were around 10, 15, 20 plus whatever years or so ago, work looked so different 20 years ago and 30 years ago, and collegiality was more present, I think. And you know, companies were smaller, and it made it easier to potentially do some of these things. And so I don't know. I think it's more so the shift that we're seeing in the last handful of years, for sure.
So I've been talking and teasing, if you will, these 5 mindsets. So we don't have time to go into any of them in a lot of depth, but I want people to get the lay of the land, in part because then they need to go buy a copy of the book so they get all the details. And we are talking, if you just now joining us, I'm talking to Paula Davis, the author of the brand new book, Lead Well, 5 Mindsets to Engage, Retain, and Inspire Your Team. And now let's outline those 5 mindsets. The first is sticky recognition and mattering. And by the way, your friend who wrote about mattering is going to be a guest on the show coming up.
Yay! Oh, he is one of my favorite people, Dr. Zach Mercurio. Yes. Yeah.
So he'll be coming up. Some more of folks that you know, like Wes Adams.
Wes and Tamara. Yes.
They were just on the other week. Well, they haven't been. Neither of your shows have gone live on the podcast, but I'll probably put the link to theirs in the show notes. But let's talk about, first of all, we all know what recognition is. What do you mean by sticky recognition?
Sticky recognition is a phrase that I created because I wanted to go a little bit deeper with the concept. And it's really a way to show a person or a team the evidence of their impact, because we know when we are keenly aware of that and the significance that we're making in our world of work, it just unlocks a whole host, a cascade of what I just call great psychological fuels. So I invented that phrase and that definition. And what I realized, because I started to look at examples of when people received moments of sticky recognition, and they would say, like, I remembered it 14 years later and it was a 2-minute conversation. And I'm like, how? Like, what is going on with that? And so I started to dig into the research a little bit more and realized that act of sticky recognition really turns on this notion of mattering. Right? We feel like we're achieving something that's important to us, but that we are also accomplishing goals that are important to us, and that people are noticing it and they're saying something about it. And it's a fundamental human need.
Absolutely, 100%. The thing that I want to say here about this is that you mentioned in this section often that this mindset doesn't mean, you've said it twice now, a simple thank you with clarity and a reason for the thank you might be all that's needed. And so I think a lot of times as leaders, we think, oh yeah, I need to do that. I don't have time to do that. Well, first of all, we need to make time. And second of all, it may not take as much time as you think. And I think
no, in fact, the example that I put in the book, the person talks about how it's a 2-minute conversation. She said the conversation took 2 minutes, and I remember it 14 years later. And it was like anything that this particular leader asked me to do, I said yes for. I mean, it just ignited something completely different in her. And when you read the chapter, as was I when I was first learning, you know, some of the strategies and tiny noticeable things, as I call them, that help to fulfill this mindset. It is shockingly easy, basic human behavior that we all learned in kindergarten, probably amplified. But
that's another book. Everything I need to learn, I learned in kindergarten. That's a whole
right.
And that was even shorter than yours, Paula.
Right.
So the second of the mindsets, and you've written about this before, but a really important piece, what you call the ABC needs.
Yes. The ABC needs are a powerful trio of needs that we all need to, and this is regardless of generation, in our world of work. And it is, the A is autonomy. So we need that sense of what I call choosing your own adventure. I want the ability to be able to have some control or say over my work and decisions. The B is belonging, so that sense of community and connection. And that the C is challenge or growth, right? We want to be growing toward goals and getting closer to things that are important to us at work.
I love that. And if we bring that mindset with us, it helps us recognize those three things are so powerful. And as leaders, we can start to find ways to engage those needs with our folks. The next one goes to one of the very specific things you said earlier about the root causes of disengagement, and that is workload. Specifically, you call this workload sustainability.
Yes.
Give us a second on that.
This was such a hard chapter to write. I fought this. I didn't want to write this chapter because as I started to dig into it, I'm like, this is just too big of this is an immensely difficult, interconnected, complicated topic to start to unravel. But I realized that I would not be giving people, given that was such a big driver of discontent, I'm like, I can't not put something about that in the book if I'm writing about mindsets that leaders need to have. And so really what it came down to, and part of it made it in the book and part of it didn't, is really good or better teaming practices and really good recovery, or what do I do when I'm stressed? How can I take a pause practices? And so it's the teaming lens or focus that is what made it in the book.
There's a piece too, and we don't have time to dive into it, but again, everybody, when you get your copy, make sure you go to page 75 when she talks about why does overload happen, and there's some points there for us as leaders, and they struck me. I think I'm pretty good on most of these, but a couple of these, like failure to rebalance when people leave.
Huge.
Impact blind. I mean, like we all know, yeah, that makes sense, but we don't do it, right? Or we assume that people will figure it out. Well, if we don't give them some help, they aren't going to be able to figure that out. Autonomy is one thing, but leaving them alone and ignoring it is something entirely different. And oftentimes, I think, especially in bigger organizations, another one of those things that you mentioned there is just an absolute blindness to the impact, right? And this is a bigger thing, but we're going to cut 10% of our workforce, and then, well, they'll figure it out. Well, we have to start to say, listen, humans aren't good at work. We're not good at saying no. And if we do things like that, like we got to help people decide what to say no to.
Well, absolutely. And also humans aren't machines. And that's how we started to functionally, I think, sort of think about them sometimes, because when you cut workforce and you keep the workload the same or it starts to increase, that's going to have a consequence. You may not care or you may not see it right away, but there's going to be outcomes associated with that. And people it's not sustainable. That word sustainability was really important to me, because that's what I'm looking for here. I'm not looking for us to take our foot off the gas. I'm not looking for us to say we've got to work less hard or all of those things. It's just that we've got to do it in a sustainable way so that people don't burn out. I've got loads of the burnout statistics still, fresh right now. I mean, and it's going in the wrong direction. And so we've got to really see how we can marry those two things.
The fifth of the mindsets is about values and team alignment. And I think, while that's super important, I think all of us can have a pretty clear picture there, but I can't have us spend time and not talk about the fourth mindset, which is systemic stress resilience, because it's such a major part of your work over the long term and not just this book. So what do we as leaders need to be thinking mindset wise around systemic stress resilience?
I think that word systemic is key. I think, and that's really a theme throughout the whole book, is that we need to be thinking, yes, how do we help individuals build the capacity or increase the skill sets that are associated with resilience? But we also have to look at it then, what can we do to make our teams more resilient? Because there's a great science that tells us more about how to do that. And even organizationally, then let's go biggest picture. How do we help to make our organizations fuel resilience at the organizational level? Because there's also great strategies for that. And I was so struck because I was writing this book last year. And as I was digging into the research, I kept coming across like little pieces and little snippets of different strands of things talking about, surveys of leaders and what have you. And consistently, it was at least half, if not more than half, of very senior executives saying that they didn't feel that their companies were well positioned to handle the next whatever crisis might be coming, which it floored me, because here we are ushering out of one of the biggest challenges and crises that organizations in our world of work has faced ever. And to say that hasn't done something to help you or want you to start to see, okay, well, what's next around the corner? and it's
because we treat it as a one-off thing. Well, that will never happen again.
and it probably won't be a huge global pandemic, but there's going to be lots of other types of challenges in various different, forms.
Well, you just mentioned one, generative AI, right? I mean, like, pick
there
it.
you go, right?
For sure. So, is there something that you wanted us to talk about, or that I didn't ask about, that you wish I would have?
I think I always like to sort of distill this down into like a quick little, what is this book about if I'm going to pick it up? And I think that leading well in this day and age comes down to two different things, really. It's really good teaming practices. And I don't think we spend enough time talking about what do good teams look like and how do they function well. And it's also really good human practices. We have to come back to this notion of meaning and values and caring about other people, and making sure that they feel connected to others at work. And we've got to do that looking through the lens of, yes, we still got to make the money and the profits and all of those good things, but it's the good teaming practices and good human practices that are going to get you a really, really long way.
Excellent. I want to shift gears and ask you a couple of questions that I always ask my guests. And one of those is, what do you do, Paula, for fun?
What do I do? So I have a 9-year-old. My daughter Lucy just turned 9 a couple of weeks ago. And so she and I love to travel. So we just did a quick little overnight on her spring break to Nashville. And so that was a new state and a new city for her. So love to travel. And I am
you do different things with a 9-year-old in Nashville than you might do with a 29-year-old. Just saying.
It was so funny because I was telling my friends, I'm like, wow, it's a really different experience. I didn't know there were that many candy shops and boot stores and like other things that we went into. So
there is a tremendous ice cream shop there.
Is there?
Imagine Dairy.
Okay, we missed it.
Amazing shake I've ever had in my life. I am not getting any payment for that, everybody. The Imagine Dairy. Longest line I've ever waited for food in my life. It's a long story.
But if it was worth it, I'll do it, right? I mean, I'm a foodie, so I love that.
Well, go back to the adventure part. We made a memory. That part is for sure.
Made a memory, and and I'm obsessed with sports, playing sports and watching sports. So there's a lot of golfing and volleyball, and I try to keep up with my running practice and all sorts of things. So I love sports.
So you hinted at, during the writing of the book, all of the reading that you need to do, and I know what that's all like. But I'm curious. What are you reading now? Is there anything that's on your reading list or you've read recently that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so there's a fantastic book. It just came out, I believe it was the end of March, called Why Workplace Wellbeing Matters by Jan Emanuel Deneve and George Ward. And part of the reason I'm not all the way through it, but they've got some great studies already that have been published. Part of the reason why I love this book is it's hugely detailed with the business case. So if you pick up Lead Well and start to see I mentioned some of their research in one of my chapters. If you want to take a much deeper dive into that research, go pick up that book, because I think it's a game changer for our well-being work at any level, because it's starting to really put very concrete business terms to it.
We will have that in the show notes, of course, as we always do. Before we let's just do this. Where can people find you? Where do you want to point people if they want to copy the book? Where do you want them to go? All that stuff.
Sure. So the hub of all things with my business is my website. So stressandresilience.com would be the first place. You can buy the book there. You can also just hop on Barnes & Noble or Amazon and buy it there as well. Also, LinkedIn is my social media platform of choice. And so it's where I publish all of my work first, my articles and studies and things of that nature. So lots of cool things coming up this year. So
awesome. So before we say our goodbyes, Paula and I, and to all of you, I've got a question that I want to ask all of you as listeners and viewers. If you've been here before, you know what I'm going to ask. Here it is. If you're new or you forgot, now what? What are you going to do with what you just got? Like, this is useful stuff. It's interesting stuff, but it's not really useful unless you go take action on it. So what is it from what you just heard Paula share that you're going to act on? And I took my own notes about what those things are for me, but the question is, what would those things be for you? How do you think about, perhaps it's thinking about what do we do to create this both people and performance focus? Maybe it's thinking about one of those mindsets. What could I do today to create some sticky recognition or to rethink workload sustainability? I don't know what that thing is for you, but what I do know is that if you don't take action on this, this will be of less value to you than if you do. Paula, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure to have you back. You're less than a dozen people, I think, have been here more than once. So you're certainly one of those.
Really?
I'm certainly glad to have you back.
I'm so honored. Thanks, Kevin. I was so looking forward to this, and it never disappoints. And so thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. So everybody, if you found this useful, take action, as I already said. But here's another action. Go tell someone else that they should listen and invite them to join you wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, and make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Like next week when we will be back with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.